My friends and I had always been drawn to the thrill of urban exploration, an activity that involved venturing into abandoned, derelict buildings to capture the eerie beauty of places forgotten by time. We never set out with the intention of encountering ghosts or supernatural forces. Rather, we were fascinated by the silence, the decay, and the fascinating stories that every crumbling structure seemed to whisper. Living in Scotland, we were spoiled by nature's raw scenery. Old deserted buildings often sat nestled among rolling hills, rugged mountains, and dense ancient forests. Even the lichen-covered stone walls and rusted metal fixtures had their own secret history that beckoned us to come closer. We made a day out of each trip, planning our excursions carefully, packing our cameras, notebooks, and sometimes even a thermos of strong tea, and setting off early in the morning when the air was crisp and expectant. One abandoned house in particular had captured our collective imagination over the years. We had visited it a couple of times before, each visit deepening our curiosity about its hidden past. Its every detail told a story: tattered wallpaper, faded floorboards that creaked under our careful steps, and windows that gazed out onto untamed nature as if keeping watch over forgotten memories. On this visit, however, things felt different. My two best friends, whom I'll call C and B, and I decided to return to our favorite house. Even though we already knew that time had not been kind to it, the house had deteriorated markedly since our last adventure. The usual entry point we had used before had been boarded up and sealed, leaving us with no choice but to search for an alternative way inside. After wandering around the perimeter, we discovered that part of the roof in one of the lower sections of the building had been largely destroyed by fire. Shingles and rafters lay scattered like charred bones, and the damaged area offered a potential entry if we could find a safe way to get up there. Using a sturdy tree that leaned just close enough to the building and working together, we managed to clamber onto what remained of the roof. The process was nerve-wracking. Each step felt uncertain as we balanced precariously on debris, but we pushed forward, driven by the thrill of exploration and the promise of new photographic discoveries. Once inside, the house welcomed us with an oppressive silence that was both beautiful and unnerving. We wandered through the rooms, our flashlights cutting narrow paths through the thick darkness that had overrun what once might have been elegant parlors and lively kitchens. I paused occasionally to admire the intricate patterns carved into old wooden door frames and the layered textures of peeling paint on the walls. Outside, the faint light of dusk filtered through the broken windows, casting long shadows that danced slowly across the floor. Every so often, a bird would suddenly take flight at the sound of our footsteps, and we would laugh nervously at our own startled reactions. It wasn't long before I sensed that something was off that day. As we explored the top 3 floors of the house, rooms that had long lost their original charm and instead worn an air of decay, we began to note subtle differences in the atmosphere. The corridors felt colder, and there was an almost tangible heaviness in the air that settled over each room we entered. My friends joked about it, attributing the sensation to the building's neglected state and the chill that came with abandonment. See, ever the skeptic dismissed such ideas with a laugh, Pete, though more receptive to the possibility of something unexplainable, tried hard to maintain a brave face even as her eyes betrayed a hint of unease. After spending a fair amount of time on the higher floors, we reconvened on the ground floor in a long, narrow hallway that branched off from the main entrance. We formed a loose triangle, a plan to discuss our next steps. I found myself standing in a doorway with my back toward an empty room with C on my left and B on my right. I remember feeling a lingering sense of discomfort, a prickling sensation along my skin that I couldn't quite ignore. As we talked casually about where to go next, a sudden, inexplicable pressure began to press along my back. It started at the base of my neck and moved steadily downward like a hand running firmly along the spine. The sensation was unmistakable and lasted only a few seconds before tapering off. In that instant, I felt the color drain from my face. I leaped forward and let out a scream so involuntary that it startled both C and B, who immediately turned to look at me in confusion and concern. They peppered me with questions, asking if I had somehow injured myself or if I had caught my sleeve on something sharp. For a long moment, I could only stand there, my mind swirling with terror and confusion, unable to string together coherent words. Finally, after a couple of deep, shuddering breaths, I managed to explain that I had felt an unmistakable touch, a sensation that could not have been self-inflicted. Bay's face palled noticeably as she took in my distressed expression, while C, still wrapped in the comfort of skepticism, chuckled and suggested that perhaps I was just overreacting, or that maybe I had brushed against something without realizing it. But I knew in my bones that it wasn't possible. I remembered vividly that split second when every hair on my body had stood on end, as if warning me that something was truly there. At that moment, an unsettling burning sensation radiated down my back. It was as if someone had plunged hot coals along my spine, sharp, searing, and impossible to ignore. I quickly asked B to check for any visible marks, and though she hesitated for just a moment, she eventually called over C to join. The look on C's face grew increasingly serious as he examined me more closely. Unable to see my own back, I implored them to take a photograph so I could see what had happened. With trembling hands, they snapped a photo, and when I reviewed it, there were 3 distinct scratches visible in the exact spot where I had felt the inexplicable touch. The scratches were orderly, like someone or something had deliberately run its claws down my back, and they extended under the strap of my shirt, an area I was sure I could never have caught myself on by accident. The discovery sent chills down my spine, and although we tried our best to remain calm, the terror of what had just transpired kept gnawing at us. Determined that whatever had happened in that abandoned house was not worth lingering over, we agreed unanimously that we had to leave. We retraced our steps toward our entry point, climbing back over the low wall that surrounded the property and then navigating our way through the broken section of the roof. We moved swiftly, each step heavy with the dread of unexplained encounters. As we reached a safe distance from the building, we paused and looked back. The old house loomed in the fading light, its broken windows and darkened walls seeming to hold secrets too vast to comprehend. In silence, we all agreed that we would never return to that place. The journey back to our car was a long, tense walk. About 20 minutes through the overgrown yard and along the edge of the forest. Throughout that walk, I could swear I felt as if eyes were on us, that the darkness itself was watching our every move. Occasionally, I thought I heard the sound of footsteps behind us, a faint rustling that made my heart pound even faster. Though every time I turned around, I saw nothing but the silent trees and the gentle rustle of leaves in the Scottish wind. There was an unmistakable sense of being pursued, though we all tried to convince ourselves that it was just our imagination. Eventually, we reached our car, where we sat for a long moment smoking in an effort to calm our racing nerves. The quiet ride back was marked by an atmosphere of relief and lingering anxiety, a feeling that, despite our escape, something intangible had followed us from that ominous place. That day became a turning point for our little band of urban explorers. For some time afterwards, C struggled to process what he had witnessed, though he had once been a steadfast skeptic. The undeniable evidence, the scratches in the photograph, the raw terror in our eyes, and the icy touch of the unknown gradually chipped away at his disbelief, turning him albeit reluctantly, into someone who now believed in things that defied explanation. Even as we swore we would never return to that haunted house, a strange, inexplicable pull began to grow among us. A magnetic urge that was both repulsive and irresistible. It was as if that place with all its mystery and dread had etched itself into our very souls, calling us back like an itch that could never be fully scratched. In the months that followed, we found ourselves haunted by our memory of that day. Every time we gathered for another small urban exploration session, the thought of that house and the terror it evoked would resurface in our conversations. Although some of us tried to rationalize the experience away, suggesting that it was merely the product of our collective imagination in an unstable, decaying environment, there was a quiet part of us that recognized the truth that certain places held power, a latent energy that could reach out and touch you even when you thought you were alone. Late at night, when I was alone with my thoughts, I would often recall that brush of a touch along my back, the peculiar burning sensation, and the vivid image of those deliberate scratches. It was as if the house itself had marked me, leaving a trace that was both physical and psychological. I remember lying awake in the darkness of my own room, recounting the incident in my mind, feeling both a profound sense of violation and an inexplicable curiosity about what it might mean. That night, the line between the ordinary and the supernatural had blurred in a way that left me questioning everything I once believed to be true. I began to wonder whether our urban explorations had awakened something dormant within us, or perhaps if those decrepit buildings held on to the memories and emotions of those who had once lived within their walls. For us, exploring the forgotten corners of the world had always been an escape, a way to capture the beauty of decay and the poetic sadness of abandonment. There was a certain allure in the peeling paint, the ghostly echoes of forgotten voices, and the silent testimonies of lives once lived. But after that fateful day, I started to realize that sometimes curiosity could lead you into realms you'd never anticipated. It taught me to respect the power of history and the hidden energies lingering in places where time had stood still. I began to understand that what we saw was not always just a play of light and shadow. Sometimes it was a message, a call from the past, or perhaps a warning to tread carefully. In the years that followed, my friends and I continued our urban explorations. Though never with quite the same carefree attitude as before, the memory of that touch, those precise scratches on my back, remained a reminder of that day. A day when the real and the surreal had collided in the desolate silence of an abandoned house. We would often return to the topic with a mix of shuddering humor and cautious respect. While some dismissed it as the product of overactive imaginations fueled by the eerie atmosphere, others couldn't shake the feeling that there was something undeniable in our experience. I remember one evening months later when I was alone, and the memory seemed particularly fresh. I sat in my darkened room, the faint hum of an old TV, the only noise in the silence. My mind wandered back to that hallway in the abandoned house, to the isolation of standing in a door frame, with my back turned to a room that had perhaps absorbed the essence of all the sorrow and decay it had witnessed. Each time I closed my eyes, the feeling of that mysterious unseen hand slid along my back, a crisp sensation I could never fully escape. It became a secret, a personal ghost story that I carried with me even as I grew older and more cynical about such things. The idea that a place could leave an indelible mark on you, the mark of a touch you never felt coming, was both fascinating and horrifying. My friends, particularly C and B, became my anchors through these experiences. C, who had evolved from a staunch skeptic into a reluctant believer, would sometimes quietly remind me that the world was more layered and inexplicable than we cared to acknowledge. B, always a voice of caution, would often urge us to leave a place immediately if it started to feel too oppressive, never pushing us too far into territory that might leave lasting scars. Together, we formed a bond forged in both adventure and shared terror, a bond that, despite its eventual fragility, held our youthful hearts together during those formative experiences. Even though we swore to never return to that dilapidated house, I often find myself drawn back to it in thought. It is as if the building has become a symbol for a moment in time, a snapshot of our childhood when the world was vast, dangerous, and filled with secrets waiting to be uncovered. I sometimes wonder if the pull is not just fear, but also a strange yearning, a desire to confront that mysterious energy again, even if only to understand it better. There is an itch inside me, a restless impulse that compels me to go back and look for answers that might have been hidden among the crumbling walls and broken glass. As the years went by, our urban explorations took on a more somber tone. The thrill of the chase was slowly replaced by a cautious respect for the unknown. I began to study the history of the abandoned places we visited, trying to decipher the stories etched in the very fabric of these structures. I would spend hours photographing decay and reading old records in local archives, piecing together the lives of those who had once inhabited these spaces. The more I learned, the more I realized that every building held secrets, and sometimes those secrets were not ready to be uncovered, not without consequences. One vivid memory that never fades is the day we decided to leave that house for good, with heavy hearts and a shared understanding that some experiences are best left behind. We gathered our things and made our way back to our car. The walk back was long and quiet, taking us about 20 minutes through a landscape that now seemed charged with an invisible presence. I could still sense even now that we were being watched. Every rustle in the trees, every distant echo of our footsteps, felt like a reminder that the past was not as far away as we wanted to believe. Yet, amidst that oppressive feeling, the stark beauty of the Scottish countryside persisted. Rolling fields of green, ancient trees stretching their gnarled branches into the twilight, and the far-off glimmer of a lake that promised solace despite the eerie atmosphere. We finally reached the car, and as we sat there catching our breath and lighting a few cigarettes to steady our nerves, a quiet conversation passed between us. Bea was still visibly shaken, her eyes darting around as if expecting the shadows to spring to life at any moment. C, although trying to maintain his usual humor, had a subdued tone in his voice that belied the transformation in his outlook. "I still don't know what that was," he said softly, "but I'm not going to pretend it wasn't real." I nodded silently, not trusting my voice to carry the weight of my own fear and wonder. Now, years later, those experiences remain a powerful part of my inner landscape. I have grown up, moved on to different projects and careers, and even pursued further studies of the paranormal, reading about hauntings, listening to podcasts about cryptids, and even visiting museums dedicated to the unexplained. But despite all the learning and rationalizing I've done, some nights when I'm alone, I still feel that same chill, an echo of that mysterious touch in the abandoned house. I wonder if that touch was a stray remnant of the building's past, perhaps a final imprint left by someone who had once lived there, or if it was a manifestation of the collective fears of a place that had seen too much sorrow and decay. I sometimes review those photographs of the scratches on my back, each line a marker of a moment when the veil between our world and something beyond had thinned just enough for me to feel its presence. Urban exploration for me, and for many of my friends, was never just about adrenaline. It became a way of understanding history, both the visible and the hidden layers that accumulate in old abandoned spaces. I remember sitting for hours on the crumbling steps of those derelict buildings, letting my mind wander as I wondered about the lives that had been lived and lost there. Every forgotten artifact, A broken mirror, an old book with tattered pages, even a shattered piece of furniture told a story. And sometimes those stories seem to speak directly to you in whispers and subtle touches, as if the very fabric of the building remembered every laugh, every cry, and every secret that had ever passed through its halls. I've often wondered if that abandoned house was like a living organism, one that absorbed the emotions of those who entered it, only to release them later as inexplicable sensations and eerie phenomena. Perhaps that touch on my back, the burning sensation, and the precise scratches were simply a physical manifestation of all the lingering energy the house had accumulated over decades of neglect and abandonment. Maybe in a way, the building itself was trying to communicate, sending a message to warn us away or to leave a reminder that we had trespassed in a place where the past still held sway. I recall the moment of our departure with a mixture of relief and lingering dread. It was as if each step away from the house was a step toward reclaiming our safety. But the memory of that forbidden touch would not soon be forgotten, even as we swore never to return. An irrational part of us remained drawn to it, pulled in by the mystery and the almost irresistible allure of uncovering secrets. In time, that house became a symbol for our youthful curiosity, our willingness to confront fear, and our longing to understand what lies hidden in the shadows of abandoned places. We never solved the mystery of the scratches, but we learned something far more valuable. A lesson in caution and respect for the unknown. Though the abandoned house itself now lies only in our memories, a once favorite destination transformed into a personal ghost story, I still feel its influence on my life. I sometimes catch myself wandering in old neighborhoods or exploring derelict buildings in search of clues of some hidden fragment of the past that might explain the inexplicable. But then I remember that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. The past, after all, is a delicate tapestry woven of light and shadow, beauty and decay, joy and fear. And it is those very contradictions that make life both profoundly mysterious and richly textured. My friends eventually drifted away from urban exploration, each of us carrying our own share of secrets and scars from those adventures. Say once a devilish skeptic became a quiet believer, his once dismissive laughter replaced by a respectful awe for the places we visited. Be ever cautious, grew more reserved, and found comfort in routines and the predictable. As for me, I learned to balance my fascination with the unknown against the need for safety and understanding. Every time I look at old abandoned structures, every creak of a weathered door, and every brush of the wind through empty corridors, I am reminded of that day. The day when a simple touch changed everything, when a moment of urban exploration revealed that some boundaries once crossed leave an imprint that lasts a lifetime. Now, as an adult, I look back at those days with both a sense of longing and a deep respect for the lessons learned. The experiences have become part of who I am, a blend of cautious wonder and hard-earned wisdom. I remind myself that while the thrill of discovery is intoxicating, it is always tempered by the knowledge that the past is never truly gone. It lingers in the spaces between walls and echoes in the silence of deserted rooms. And so each time I plan an adventure or even pass by an old building, I do so with careful eyes and an open heart, knowing that the world is vast, mysterious, and full of secrets waiting to be discovered. I share these memories not just as tales of urban exploration, but as insights into the unpredictable nature of life. There is beauty in decay, and there is terror in the unknown. Both coexist in a fragile balance that can give you chills on a quiet night. And while the scratches on my back and that unsettling feeling of being touched may never be fully explained, they serve as a reminder of the day I learned that every forgotten building, every neglected space carries a story that might just reach out to you when you least expect it. In the end, The abandoned house remains my most vivid memory of urban exploration, a symbol of youthful bravery, of moments when laughter mixed with terror, and of a night that left us forever changed. Though I have grown older and now approach such adventures with a healthy mix of curiosity and caution, I still remember that first inexplicable touch with a mixture of awe and lingering fear. It is a reminder that while we might seek out the beauty of abandoned places, we must also be ready to confront the unexpected. And sometimes the mysteries we encounter are not meant to be unraveled. They are simply reminders that the world is full of things beyond our understanding, things that haunt us in ways that shape our future in silent, profound ways.